Breaking news. We have our castings for James Gunn's first film in the DC universe, Superman Legacy. We have our two leads. Playing Clark Kent / Superman is David Corenswet. And playing the one and only Lois Lane is Rachel Brosnahan. Ricky Flicks, Emergency Podcast. We have castings that we've long awaited, long suspected. We've talked about the candidates, and they've been revealed, confirmed by James Gunn. What's your reactions first off with these two names? What pops to mind?
Well, I first got to say, David Corenswet, that's out of the three names that were the finalists, he's the guy that looks the most like Clark Kent while also having the build for a potential Superman. 6'4". He is very well built, but he also just looks like Clark Kent. You're thinking of Pearl as the projectionist, and you could just picture plopping glasses on that guy. He's Clark Kent. So I think he's the guy. I liked him over Tom Brittany, a little bit more oomph on his resume. We Own the City with John Bernthal. He's going to be in Twisters with Lee Isaac Chung's movie with Glenn Powell. And what's her name? Daisy Edgar Jones. So he's got some prestige to his name, but not too much. I think that's perfect for the Superman James Gunn's going for. And then I think for Rachel Brosnahan, that's just the person out of the three finalists that had the best resume. I think Emma Mackey was the best Lois Lane look, but she's barely been in anything. Honestly, less than 10 feature films, and most of them very minor roles, small roles. She's going to be in Barbie, yes. She was in Emily, not amazing. Death on the Nile, kind of forgotten. So she just has the look. I think Rachel Brosnahan, I'm thinking of House of Cards because that's the first time I've seen her, but obviously most people are going to think of the marvelous Mrs. Maisel, whatever. Amazing in that critically. I think that's also the pick. So I think James Gunn nailed it.
Based on the candidates, I think he nailed it as well. Corenswet, I like the idea. He's not relatively known for anything else. He's been in solid projects to great projects, and it gives an opportunity for him to become and known for Superman. Like the universe of Superman, almost like you don't want someone too tightly connected with another franchise, or maybe someone that has too much notoriety, that has had such a long length in their filmography that people are just like, oh, I can't wait to see him just based on what he's done before. So I think this is someone that like fans can rally around with David Corenswet. And if James Gunn has this pick, right, for these two characters, these picks, I trust him because he hasn't steered me wrong in comic book films. Brosnahan, the more I see stills of her, I think she's an awesome pick. I envision those two as a great couple on screen to carry us through the DCU. And Marvelous Miss Maisel, it's a comedy, right? So it's like bringing that fun type of mentality to a Superman film. And I think that's something that is obvious with this casting because Man of Steel, obviously a darker take on the Superman character. Henry Cavill, that casting kind of reminds me of David Corenswet. Henry Cavill, though, he had been up for so many parts at that time. Like he was potentially going to be the next James Bond.
The Nicholas Hoult of that era, some would say.
Yeah, so he was just banking on that moment when he got a little bit older. He had the look early on. David Corenswet also looks like he has that look early on. And Henry Cavill, as much as he's done these other projects, he's done The Witcher, I don't think of The Witcher when I see Henry Cavill. He still is Superman to me, and I like the opportunity that Corenswet has in front of him here.
Yeah, and I think for me, I mentioned Emma Mackey. If I just go to Phoebe, I cannot pronounce it. How do you pronounce it?
Denevor?
Denevor. I like that. Again, like Bridgerton. That's the only thing I recognize. The resume is just not great, but I think she's considered a better actress right now at this time than Emma Mackey. I just personally like Emma Mackey more because of the look. But again, I think Rachel Brosnahan was the pick. And I think out of the three names, it was clear as day. We've been saying that since day one. And the David Corenswet versus Nicholas Hoult that we just mentioned, I can't help but feel bad for Nicholas Hoult. I know he's more of your guy than my guy. But again, one movie I watched this weekend was Renfield on Peacock. And I kind of liked him in it. I'm not gonna lie, I kind of did like him, and I've always liked him. I liked him in the Menu. I'm trying to think what else. Obviously,
Those Who
as
Wish Me
Beast.
Dead.
Those Wish Me Dead. I know you're more fan. Mad Max Fury Road. People will think of. I'm thinking of X-Men, the new X-Men, and him as Hank Pym. Sorry, not Hank Pym. Hank Beast. But yeah, like he's that guy. Like he was up for the Batman. I just feel kind of bad for him because he has so much talent. Like he's gonna star in Clint Eastwood's last movie. Like that's like huge. He's gonna be in Nosferatu. Robert Eggers. Like next to Skarsgård, Bill Skarsgård. Like has like a lot of oomph, and the resume was clearly him. So they went with resume with Lois Lane, and they went with the best kind of resume look mix here for Superman. And I think that was the way to go. And I just want to mention one last thing with Rachel Brosnahan. I know I'm going on a rant right now. Going with the comedic route a little bit, to your point, I love that because I think that's something that with the past couple of Lois Lanes, we haven't gotten that at all, like whatsoever. You think about 2006 Superman Returns, even. I think if you think of the comic, the animated series, the animated Superman series, the animated movies from DC that are on HBO Max, I highly recommend. Any of the Batman, the Superman, Justice League ones, like that Lois Lane has a mix of that we talked about, but also comedic chops a little bit. And I think for this type of James Gunn type of script that this is going to be, I think that's perfect. So I do really like that casting.
Sassy, and refuses to be intimidated. That's like what you think of with Lois Lane. And like that idea of Amy Adams, I could see her not being intimidated, right? And like you could tell like her love for Bruce Wayne, Clark Kent and Superman, but it didn't capture any of that comedic timing or elements from the comic book character or from the animated series. I want to talk a little bit about Nicholas Hoult here, because we talked about Henry Cavill always being up for these roles and like being denied and denied. You now have Nicholas Hoult at this stage where he was denied the role in the Batman, right, to Robert Pattinson. He was denied now to Superman, to Corn Sweat. I personally think he should be Lex Luthor now. I think he should take this frustration and this anger that he probably has and turn it into actual hate for Superman. And I think he actually looks more of the part of a Lex Luthor than he did for Superman in the first place. Maybe like after, like you could have like almost like where you interview for a job, you interview for one job, but we keep you in mind for the next one.
Cillian Murphy, great example.
Right. And that could be something where we're looking at, yes, when he auditioned for the Batman famously and then became like villains as Scarecrow. Like I would love to see him taking on a villain with gravitas and someone that is in a similar age range as a David Corn Sweat. I think it could work. And that's another thing I was going to talk about. I love how these actors are 29 and 32 or 33 respectively. Like the ones that were cast with Corn Sweat and Brosnahan. Like these are people that we're going to tell an overarching story, connected story that James Gunn has been preaching for this new look DCU. And you got to have that core part of it, the Superman part of this story. It's got to be someone that you carry through and not one that you're killing off in its sequel like you had in Batman vs. Superman. This guy we're going to be riding out all the way. So it's like, once again, he's going to become our Superman, and almost like we're going for what we get with like Chris Hemsworth in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, where he's just become our Thor, right? After being unknown. And then Chris Evans, like relatively unknown. He was our Human Torch for a little bit, but he's carried on to be our Captain America, and he can't shake it now. Like Corn Sweat, I want and I hope for him to like have that type of effect on audiences.
Yeah, I think I love the casting. I do. I think they nailed it. But I think, just to your point, I think a lot of people are saying the same thing as you now, that they feel bad for Nicholas Hoult, but they wanted to be Lex Luthor. I am kind of not on that boat. I do agree he's more of a Lex Luthor than a Superman. And I agree that if they're going to go with a young Lex Luthor, similar to Jesse Eisenberg a little bit when he was cast, then Nicholas Hoult would be the guy. But I don't want that in Lex Luthor. I want a little older Lex Luthor. Kind of like he's going to win a couple rounds against Superman, because Superman's an all-powerful being, right?
You see it with the Superman and Lois show, right? Where you have Michael Cudlitz being cast as an older version of Lex Luthor with the beard and everything. Yeah, I see what you're saying too. That's historically what happens.
And I don't mean to transition, but I think I'm sorry, not Stellan. Alexander Skarsgård would be the perfect Lex Luthor. He would be. Like, he is just that menacing, smart, cunning, can chop it up comedically too, similar to the big KS did in Superman Returns a little bit. But again, like that Lex Luthor that we know from the comics, from the animated show, from the animated movies that I mentioned, that's stocky too. But like, again, he's not going to go toe to toe with Superman, but he looks the part, but he also can make some adjustments with a suit, with his just genius to kind of outduel Superman, a younger Superman at times, because he's older, more experienced, and things like that. A mastermind, similar to a Madsen. So I would love Alexander Skarsgård to be a Lex Luthor over a Nicholas Hoult, but I don't hate the Nicholas Hoult shout.
I think he's too yoked. I think Skarsgård is too yoked for the part, right? You want to believe that Lex Luthor can beat Superman not by like physical strength, but by like his mind.
Don't think of the Northman. Think of Madsen.
Even in Madsen, as Madsen, he looked huge. Like he just is a big dude, you know. Honestly, like I like Skarsgård more. I like to see him on screen more so than Nicholas Hoult. So I don't hate the casting whatsoever. I was just thinking more of like Nicholas Hoult. He's like a bridesmaid, but never a bride. You know, with all of these parts, I just think like if he brought that pissed off energy to Lex Luthor, it would be pretty cool. You know, but I have a hard time like when you get denied that part of Superman. It's not like Cillian Murphy was so young and then he went on to play a supporting villain, you know? So he looked at that as a win. I don't know if Nicholas Hoult would view it as a win if he loses Superman but becomes Lex Luthor. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do. I also just want to say Corn Sweat's going to get yoked for this. Like he already is yoked, but he's going to get huge, like massive, big. So he will be bigger than Skarsgård. I want to make that clear.
He's 6'4", I think I saw.
And Skarsgård's also 6'4".
Ooh.
So I'm just saying he will be more yoked than Skarsgård, and they're also the same height, which you could just picture like the older versus younger, but they're also the same height, just like that duo right there. You could picture it
face to face.
Thank you. Sorry for the listeners. You could really picture it, and I think for Holt, again, I don't hate that. I think I would like that casting better than a Bill Skarsgård.
Mm-hmm.
I think so because when I think Bill Skarsgård, yes, Pennywise, the Marquis, he's a little more horror-y.
Well, I don't want he's got that shadowy eye look.
Yeah,
you know?
I don't want that as Lex Luthor. I want Lex Luthor to be freaking like Mark Zuckerberg. Not Mark Zuckerberg, because that's like Jesse Eisenberg. Like I don't know, like a CEO for a Fortune, like one of the biggest companies in the world, like I don't know, the Christian Bale type of Batman, Bruce Wayne, and not look like that, but like put together and kind of good looking, or at least like put together versus like, I don't know, just kind of.
He could convince you in a conversation to do anything. Like someone that like he'll like comes off, you could tell he has that evil type of vibe, but like also you're going to do what I say. You know, like you don't get that with Jesse Eisenberg. He just seemed very feeble. You don't want a feeble type of Lex Luthor.
Yeah, like Bill Skarsgård looks evil all the time. Like Lex Luthor literally is like Batman. Like the reason why I bring up Bruce Wayne, like he is a superhero and he's not. Like similar to Clark Kent, like you can't like be like, oh, that guy's obviously Batman. You know,
rich and powerful. You know,
yeah, like. I think for Lex Luthor, it's like, oh, that's a CEO of a major company. You don't think of him as a supervillain. I think Bill Skarsgård, you look at him, if he's playing Lex Luthor and he's like in the business world, you think that guy's evil. I don't know, all the time.
Let's get a jacked up version of like Elon Musk. That's what we need. The jacked up like version of Elon Musk. That's what we're getting with Lex Luthor here.
But I don't know. I think I'm doing a bad job explaining, but I think you might get my point here.
Yeah, no, I see what you're saying. He's got to be cunning. He's got to be slick, right? Maybe a little bit on the younger side, but not as young as Superman. Like we're talking about here. Someone still has like age and experience and intelligence and knowledge and over a Superman. Okay. Any other thoughts on this casting before we wrap up here?
Like kudos to James Gunn. I think this is a great start. But again, going back to our prior MCU versus DCU, still a long road ahead. But this was a big thing to get right. And they obviously, it's just the casting. Okay. But this is what we do in the drive-in. We talk about on the checkup. Like this is, we get hyped about this stuff. Like this is just what we do. This is a big step, I think. cast of Superman. And he also mentioned today that they're very, very far apart, or they're a million of miles away, I think was the quote or something like that, from casting a Batman. So at least like you get a Superman here. Let's focus on that. I kind of love that too. So we did great on the casting. We're focusing on it. I love that for the DCU to start.
And they said they're miles and miles away from casting Batman.
Thank you.
One step at a time. Okay. Step in the right direction. Seems like positive reception mostly from audiences. But once again, right, we got to see what in 2025 we're really looking at, or even prior to that. Let's get that first trailer. Before that trailer, we're going to get that first look, of him in the blue, red, gold suit. Give us that look and see if he looks the part. I bet they're going to nail it. All right. That does it for this emergency pod. Okay. If you listen to this pod and you haven't checked out our previous pod on Secret Invasion, episode 1 recap, along with our, speaking of castings, the rumored castings for the Fantastic Four, along with some fan cast there, right? Make sure you check that out with a very special guest, our MCU correspondent, Jax. Make sure you're also tuned into the pod. We're back with the checkup. We're back with the checkup this week. We went on a 2-episode hiatus here, right? Dr. O had to do some traveling, and then I had some issues along the way, but we are back and better than ever. Make sure you're locked into us. Make sure if you're watching on YouTube, like, comment, and subscribe. If you're listening in podcast form, make sure you rate us 5 stars and leave a review if you can. Thank you very much. All right. Socials at The Driving Pod on Twitter and Instagram. Stay locked in. That's going to do it for the emergency pod. Until next time, we will smell ya.